Hey everyone, it's Mr. Wildboy94. I hope you're doing well today. I have a book review, or really a short story review, mainly because I watched a documentary on Tubi that I saw many years ago, I believe, called Lovecraft: Fear of the Unknown. It came out in 2008. I highly recommend it, and it kind of got me not only with the fall weather we're currently having in my I can't talk today. In my certain part of Virginia, we're having a weather that is very reflective of the fall October feel, even though it's still September. And it kind of put me in the mood for some Lovecraft, and especially after I watched that documentary, it really reinforced that. I'm excited for the Hellraiser reboot coming out, but I'm also excited to talk about some Lovecraft. I figured what I'd do, since I have one big collection here, and I also have one on my Nook. Yeah, I have one on my Nook as well that has supposedly everything that Lovecraft had ever done. I thought I'd go ahead and get into reviewing his short stories. Now the thing is, most people would probably just take a big old tome of his, because he wrote a lot of short stories like this particular collection I'm about to show you, and they would probably just go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to review the whole book in one go, give my thoughts on each story. I think the man deserved more than that, even though he's not my favorite writer ever. I'm kind of a little bit of a mixed bag with this guy, because I don't entirely always understand what he's saying, because I'm dumb. My lexicon, my vocabulary is a lot less short of what Mr. Lovecraft had back in the day. Anyway, this is a review of the first story called The Beast in the Cave of the H.P. Lovecraft, the Complete Fiction, whatever, collection from Barnes & Noble's leather-bound editions. I love this book, number one. Do you remember back in the day, and they still make this, the Wild Berry Pop-Tarts? This book has always, every time I've looked at it, every time I see the spine on my bookshelf, it reminds me of Wild Berry Pop-Tarts, and I will stand by that till the day I die. I love this book. I think it's fantastic. It makes me feel better, too, with the silver lining on the books. It reminds me of a Bible. It's kind of like a Lovecraft Bible. And a purple bookmarker thing. Anyway, The Beast in the Cave is about 5 pages long. I just read this for the first time probably a year ago. I want to say about a year ago. It was right before my house renovation stuff started happening with the kitchen, which most of you probably don't know about that, but when my wife and I moved in here, not too many months of living here, we finally had a renovation start up in the kitchen to fix a lot of older things like cabinets and whatever. God did a great job. I read this around that time early this year, and I absolutely love this story. And from what I remember from back in the day on my original Mr. Wildboy94 channel, I used to do this exact thing, reviewing individual H.P. Lovecraft stories, and eventually I'll get to novels and novellas or whatever, like in the what is the Call of Cthulhu and Shadow over Innsmouth, I think is what it's called. All those stories. Eventually I'll get there, but for right now, I just want to break down each story at a time. A lot of his short stories, being in the pulp age of the 20s and the 18s and whatever, this fellow would write things that were very pulp-natured in the horror way, but he writes in such a different way from anybody else, and I'll get there in a moment. Of course, just like any of my reviews, I am going to rate these, and I will keep all of these spoiler-free, but that will also kind of hinder some of my descriptions of the stories to try to intrigue you to read some of these that I really like, including this particular one, The Beast in the Cave, because I gotta be vague. These are short stories. I want you to be able to jump in and enjoy them, but they're not a short story like Stephen King would write, like 50, 60 to 100 pages long, really being a novelette. I can't really tell you too much because 5 pages is 5 pages. The Beast in the Cave, I read this recently, and where I was going with that, what I was telling you just now, I love it. I think it might be my favorite thing Lovecraft ever wrote. Mind you, I've probably read maybe a third. Probably not even that. Maybe. I've probably read about maybe somewhere between a quarter and a third of what he wrote. And I've enjoyed a lot of it. But again, I don't entirely understand everything, so when I do these reviews, and mind you, I'll probably do 3 or 4 of these in between each book, novel, whatever that I review, as I read these things, if I get some details wrong on a plot, let me know. I'm going to try to double check that online just to be 100% sure before I come into my reviews, but I'm fairly able to keep up with the general thing. But if you know pulp, and if you know Mr. Lovecraft, the way he writes his pulps, and his horror, and whatever all this other stuff is, he kind of jumps from spot to spot, very much like myself in my reviews. Anyway, The Beast in the Cave, what is this short story about? Well, again, being 5 pages long, there's essentially a fellow who was part of like a tour guide type of thing, and apparently this is a very early story that Lovecraft wrote. I'm not going to say it's his first, but apparently he wrote, I guess, the first version, according to the notes in the beginning of this book, before you read the story, that I think he wrote this when he was like 15, and then I think that he updated it, I believe, a couple of times with some rewrites over the years. I love it. I think it's a fantastic story. The ending twist is fantastic. I love it. Very, very, very memorable. It's one of the few, like the Picture in the House I think he also wrote, that have stuck with me all of my life since I read it. Again, this I only read a year ago, but Picture in the House, or whatever it was titled, The Butcher or something like that, when I read that one years ago, it really stuck with me, back on the original Mr. Wildwood 94 channel. So the Beast in the Cave, the fellow is part of a tour guide group, and he gets lost in some cave that they're exploring. And he's in the dark, pretty much. He starts to hear kind of a foot pattering type of thing. It kind of sounds like 2 feet, kind of sounds like 4 the next. He's not really sure if it's just, you know, one creature or entity walking around on all fours, or if it's on twos and there happens to be 2 people doing this, or whatever. He doesn't know. And he's terrified and petrified, as, you know, Lovecraft characters typically are. And I will tell you, the way that Lovecraft describes the cave, and the echoing, and the darkness, and the way the darkness moves, and especially the sound effects. How does a writer really pull off sound effects without using onomatopoeia? There we go. How does a writer even pull that off with just doing, like, you know, the old Adam West Batman thing of throwing a word on the page in front of your face in big old letters and capitalized and all of that? How do you even do that? Well, Lovecraft did it. If you want to explore how to tell kind of a sound effect without showing one word, read his book. Read his short stories. He has a lot of stuff in here that he can really teach you about that, I think. The dude was very talented, and this is one of those stories that really proved that. He's just talented in a different way. People have to really like his writing style. I remember back in the day, I liked a couple of stories of his, but I mostly hated most of the things I read because of the way he wrote them, like The Rats in the Walls. I used to hate that. Not really sure where I stand on it now. It's been a long time, but I used to hate it back in the day. I don't really have any feelings or memory of it now. The Beast in the Cave, to me, is extremely effective. I don't know what it was. This is the first time I came back to Lovecraft about a year ago, and I started reading through this a little bit. And this particular short story, it just hit me in a way that none of his stories had, except for The Picture in the House. It really lingered with me. There was something about the final twist. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but it hit me in a way that really felt like a gut punch. It just felt like that was so well done. It just really landed, and it really, really worked for me. Now, I don't really have anything else to say about the book, of course. I've told you all my basic thoughts about the book cover itself, the Pop-Tart Wild Berry cover that I love deeply. But again, his writing style is really what gets me. I'm not going to hit on this on every single H.P. Lovecraft review. I really want to highlight it here. Even with the first-person narration that Lovecraft, from what I understand, used all the time. I've never read anything otherwise, but maybe he changed up sometimes, I don't know. But from his first-person way of writing, he tries to use massive words, and he has run-on sentences that are like, should be chopped into like 2 or 3 different sections of a paragraph, and they will go on and be one whole sentence. And that, in my brain, my dumb lizard brain, starts to melt my brain a little bit. It kind of falls apart for me, and sometimes I get distracted. If the dishwasher's running in the kitchen next to my living room where I read, then a lot of the time, my brain starts getting distracted with whatever's going on in there with the swishing and the swashing. It's very hard to focus for me. It's not like a laid-back type of thing, like I'm reading Travis McBee, or I'm reading Richard Lehman, or anybody like that. Stephen King especially. I'm very easily able to get sucked into his books because I can focus, with all the bloat and everything else, I can still focus and really enjoy what I'm reading because of the way it's written. Even for the time when Lovecraft wrote, in the 20s especially, the 30s, the dude didn't write like the people that wrote at that time. It's very much like the Shakespeare debate about him writing the way people around him wrote at that time. It wasn't as prevalent at that time. It's very much a stylistic choice, and if you don't like it, you're probably not going to like it. But I do recommend, again, myself, I was not a fan the first time I read Lovecraft. I'd recommend to you, if you happen to not be, to give it a few shots. Try to give it the benefit of the doubt. Try it out. That's what I'm really trying to say. Try your best to invest yourself and get into it, but it's not going to be for everybody. A lot of it is just existential crisis type of stuff. The Beast in the Cave is not, but a lot of the stuff is. So it might rub a lot of readers the wrong way, the way it rubbed me the wrong way back when I read it for the first time in high school. I was not impressed then, and a lot of the time, because I get kind of bored with some of the ways that he writes certain things, I kind of get a little lost now sometimes when I read his stuff. But for the most part, I typically enjoy the base story in these books, because it's not your typical modern-day first-person perspective types of tales where people just fill it up with all of this stuff that really doesn't matter. If you read any creepypasta lately, I love creepypasta, but Jesus. It's not like that vein. It's just a different type of vein where we're going from event to location to event to location constantly. There's not really, oh, my enemy over here said this. It's, he tells you in his own paraphrasing what that person said, kind of like a letter, you know, if somebody were calling an event to you. And that's fascinating. Nobody really does that now. So going back and reading this, it's a little bit different than what you expected. Lovecraft has his issues. I have my flaws and my problems with him, but in my personal opinion, The Beast in the Cave is one of his best stories of all time. And if I ever finish this massive 1,100-page book, which I know there's like an essay in the back of here, so I probably won't review that. I have no reason to review an essay. I'll probably read it, but probably not review it. When I finish up reading the stuff in here, mainly his stories, I will probably go ahead and do a ranking of, not all the stories, but just probably maybe my top 5 or 10 favorite stories and my top 5 and 10 worst. I don't know. I'll probably do that. But anyway, we'll see what happens down the road. I'm starting to kind of put a list together now. I don't want to rank all the stories because not everything is in here, by the way. In case you buy this from Barnes & Noble, they're lying. It's not the complete fiction. Not everything is in here. It's not. So anyway, when it comes to The Beast in the Cave, I'm sorry for all the rambling in this review. I won't be doing that on future videos. I kind of just wanted to put a staple out there for many of the things that I think about Lovecraft, many of the things as an introduction to this book, my feelings on the Wild Berry Pop-Tart cover of this book. Anyway, The Beast in the Cave, I highly recommend it as a place to start for anybody for Lovecraft. I think it's the best place to really get a 5-page gist of a really good storyteller who had a very weird way of executing his stories most of the time. But I think this is the best execution I've ever seen, in my personal opinion, from the small amount of stuff I've seen and read from him. Again, a quarter to a third of his stuff. I would say this is probably one of his best, in my opinion. I know it sounds weak. I know a lot of people don't seem to say that. When I watched the Lovecraft Fear of the Unknown, nobody seemed to say it there, especially Peter Straub. It made me sad that I found out the other day he passed away. God rest him, dude. I've only read The Talisman from him. I have a couple of books of his, like Ghost Story. I might read that this year because of him. Anyway, The Beast in the Cave, if I had to rate this story, I keep trying to say book, if I had to rate this short story on a 5-star basis, I would easily give this one a 5 out of 5 stars. I really dig it. I think it's a really solid one, and I think you guys will too if you give it a chance, especially if you're new to Lovecraft. It's a great place to start. Anyway, it's a Friday. I hope you guys have a good weekend, and I'm sorry for all the traffic noises, everybody flying up and down the street. Sorry about that. Thank you guys for watching. I'm going to try to get out a couple more reviews for you tonight when I get home from work, and I'll have some other stuff to talk about with you. But yeah, I've read like 3 or 4 short stories in here so far, so I thought I'd go ahead and do that. Before I jump into the next book, I'm going to start reading to review and getting into my Halloween watches and stuff like that. I'm super stoked about that. Anyway, what are your thoughts on The Beast in the Cave? What are your thoughts on Lovecraft? What's your favorite story from him? Put all that in the comment section down below, and I hope you'll subscribe and check out some of the reviews in the future. Again, this is the first of them, and there's a playlist, by the way, just in case you want more. I hope you'll check out those other reviews I'm going to do for Lovecraft stuff, but they won't be as detailed as this was, or as all over the place as this one was. I had a lot to cover. Forgive me. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. God bless you all, and goodbye.